What if one fleeting glimpse of something magnetic, something forbidden, drew you across the street into a moment that reshaped everything you thought you knew about connection? This story will pull you in, wrap you in its warmth, and leave you questioning where you draw your own line. The realization hit me like a spark catching dry tinder, igniting something deep inside. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something raw, electric, pulsing in the air. For weeks, my sister Sophie and I had noticed it in our quiet Colorado Springs neighborhood. Every woman who left our neighbor's house walked away with a dazed look, as if they'd experienced something profound, something they'd carry forever. We had questions, burning ones, and they weren't going to answer themselves. So we crossed the street to introduce ourselves, and the moment he opened the door, his calm, knowing smile told us he'd been expecting us, as if he'd known we'd come all along. It was late, past 10 in the evening, and I was halfway up the stairs in our Pueblo home when a flicker of light caught my eye through the front window. Across the street, his bedroom light snapped on, and he wasn't alone. I froze, one hand gripping the banister, my breath catching in my throat. A woman stood near his window, her dress slipping off her shoulders with an ease that suggested familiarity. She leaned into him, her hands resting on his chest, while he stood calm and unhurried, as if time itself bent to his presence. "Sophie," I called, my voice low, urgent, barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." She shuffled in from the living room, a blanket draped around her shoulders, her hair messy from lounging on the couch. "What?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. I pointed without turning, my gaze fixed across the street. "He's at it again." She sighed, exasperated. "Emma, it's late." "No, seriously, look." She stepped beside me, hesitant, her blanket trailing behind her. When she glanced out the window, her eyes widened, her breath catching. Through the glass, the scene was vivid. The woman's back was pressed against the wall now, his hand braced beside her head, steadying himself. He leaned in, whispering something that made her laugh softly, then fall silent as he drew her closer with a gentle, deliberate touch. Sophie covered her mouth, her voice a whisper. "We shouldn't be watching this." But her tone wavered, betraying her curiosity. "And yet," I said, a grin tugging at my lips, "here we are." We stood there, pressed close to the window, our breaths fogging the glass, caught in the pull of something forbidden. He moved with quiet confidence, his actions measured, as if her responses were familiar, anticipated. She clung to him, her head tilting back, her body trembling with the intensity of the moment. Sophie shifted beside me, her blanket slipping slightly. "Is that the same woman from last week?" "Nope," I said, my voice low. "New one. 5th or 6th this month, maybe." Sophie shook her head, but her eyes stayed glued to the scene. "That's unreal," she murmured. "I'm telling you," I whispered, leaning closer. "They walk in confident, laughing, and leave looking like they've been through something life-changing." We watched her tense, her expression shifting, caught in a moment of surrender, while he remained steady, his presence commanding yet gentle. Sophie turned away, her cheeks flushed. "Okay, that's enough." I didn't move, my eyes still locked on the window. "You can't tell me you're not curious." She sat on the couch's armrest, clutching her blanket tighter. "I mean, he's impressive," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Impressive?" I said, raising an eyebrow, a playful edge to my tone. "That man's a mystery. Mid-50s, quiet, never boasts, yet every woman leaves his place like they've stepped out of a dream." Sophie bit her lip, her cheeks growing pinker. I smiled, leaning closer. "I want to know what that's like." She laughed nervously, shaking her head. "You're not serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," I said, my voice steady. "Not tonight, but tomorrow, I'm going over to say hi." "You're going to what?" she said, eyes wide with disbelief. "Knock on his door and ask for a sample?" "Maybe I'll borrow sugar," I said, grinning, "or ask if he needs help with something. Whatever works." Sophie stood, her blanket still clutched tight. "You're out of your mind, Emma." "I know," I said, my grin widening. "But admit it. You're wondering too." She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket tighter and looked away. But the flush on her face told me everything. The next morning, I woke with him still on my mind, the image of last night etched into my thoughts like a vivid dream. I didn't feel guilty about watching. My curiosity had only deepened, a restless pull I couldn't ignore. What was it about him that left every woman so transformed? Sophie, meanwhile, acted like nothing had happened. She was curled up on the couch in our Fort Collins home, still in her pajamas, eating cereal as the TV hummed softly. I leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. "So," I said casually, "I'm thinking now's a good time." She didn't look up, her spoon pausing midair. "Good time for what?" "You know what?" I said, a teasing edge to my voice. She sighed, bracing herself. "You were serious?" "Completely," I said, grabbing my keys from the counter. "Emma," she groaned, setting her bowl down, "you can't just knock on some guy's door because you liked what you saw through his window." "First," I said, tossing her a hoodie, "it's not just what I saw. It's what we've seen over and over, for weeks. And last night, that sealed it." Sophie pulled the blanket over her head, muffling her voice. "I'm not going." "You don't have to do anything," I said, tugging the blanket down. "Just come with me. Back me up. Maybe pretend we're borrowing something." She peeked out, eyes narrowing. "Why do you even want me there?" "Because," I said, meeting her gaze, "you'll keep me from going too far, or push me to go further. Either way, it'll be interesting." She rolled her eyes but stood, arms crossed, already giving in. Minutes later, we were crossing the street, my heart thudding with anticipation, not nerves, like I was walking towards something inevitable. Sophie lagged behind, her hoodie pulled tight, looking like she wanted to disappear. I knocked once and the door opened almost instantly. There he stood, barefoot, shirt halfway buttoned, hair damp from a shower. His name, we'd learn, was Nathan, and his calm, measured gaze said he'd been expecting us, like he'd known this moment was coming. His eyes moved from me to Sophie, then back, steady, as if he already understood our reasons. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Sorry to just show up. We were out for a walk and thought we'd say hi." Sophie stood behind me, arms crossed, silent, her hoodie a shield. He nodded, his voice low and even. "Nice of you to stop by. I'm Nathan." "I'm Emma, and this is Sophie," I said, gesturing to her. "We live across the street." "I know," he said, his tone calm but with an edge that suggested he saw through our excuse. He stepped aside and we walked in. The house was warm, bathed in soft morning light, with the faint smell of coffee lingering. Music played low, slow, and soulful, setting a mood that felt intentional. On the counter sat 2 glasses, one filled with something amber. I raised an eyebrow, playful. "Expecting someone?" "Not really," he said, handing me a glass with a faint smile. "Just figured I might have company." I shot Sophie a look. She pretended not to notice, hovering near the door, fidgeting with her hoodie. "You're not what I pictured," I said, sipping the drink, its warmth spreading through me. "Neither are you," he replied, his eyes steady. I smirked, leaning forward. "And what did you picture?" "People who watch that closely usually avoid eye contact the next day," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Sophie flinched, her cheeks reddening. I didn't. "You saw us," I said, unfazed. "It's a window," he replied, "not a one-way mirror." I laughed, sharp and quiet, enjoying his honesty. "Fair." He sat on the couch's edge, arms on his knees, relaxed but attentive, waiting for us to set the pace. Sophie stayed near the door, silent. "You can go any time," he said gently, looking at her, his voice soft but firm. "No pressure." She didn't answer, just stayed, her eyes flicking between us, uncertainty mixing with curiosity. I leaned on the couch's back, facing him, my voice playful but direct. "You get a lot of fake excuses at your door." He looked up, a calm smile tugging at his lips. I leave the window open for a reason. I didn't back away. I leaned closer, resting a hand lightly on his shoulder, feeling the warmth beneath his shirt. He didn't move, just let his hand settle on my arm, steady, like he'd been expecting me to make the first move. Sophie's voice cut through, sharp and uncertain. "You're actually doing this?" I looked at her, still near the door, her hoodie pulled tight. "You act like I dragged you here," I said, teasing. "You kinda did," she shot back, quieter now. "Then go," I said, "or stay and admit that you're not just here for me." She shook her head, but her eyes lingered on Nathan, betraying her curiosity. "He's a stranger, Emma." "No," I said, steady. "He's the guy who's had every woman in this neighborhood leaving his house like they forgot what day it was, including the one we watched last night." Nathan raised an eyebrow, amused. "I try to make sure they don't forget me," he said, his voice low, confident. Sophie flinched but didn't look away, her breath catching. I stood, walked to her, and took her hand, feeling her pulse jump. "You don't have to do anything," I said quietly, "but don't lie to yourself either." I guided her forward, step by step, in front of him. He looked at her, calm, unreadable, then leaned in and kissed her. Sophie let out a shaky breath, pulling back after a moment. Her face flushed, eyes wide. I didn't hesitate. I stepped in, kissing him with full intent. The connection immediate, electric, pulling me under. His hands moved to my hips, grounding me in the moment. His touch steady and deliberate. When I leaned back, the air was thick with unspoken possibilities. I moved closer, my hands resting lightly on his shoulders, feeling the warmth of his presence. He mirrored my movements, his touch fluid, like we'd always known this moment was coming. Behind me, Sophie hesitated, her breath uneven. Nathan looked past me, offering her a hand, his expression calm but inviting. She stepped forward, slow, cautious, her hoodie slipping slightly, revealing her uncertainty but also her curiosity. He kissed her again, softer, and she didn't pull away, her breath quickening. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her, while I moved closer, my touch light but sure, weaving us into the moment. Sophie joined me, her movements tentative at first, but growing bolder as she followed my lead, our hands brushing briefly, sinking in a shared rhythm. When Nathan leaned back slightly, a quiet sign of surrender, I felt the connection deepen, the air alive with our shared energy. "Both of you up," he said, his voice low, steady. We stood, our breaths uneven but synchronized. He shifted on the couch, arms wide, inviting us closer. I climbed onto the cushions, settling close, feeling the warmth of his presence, my heart racing with anticipation. His touch was deliberate, unhurried, drawing out every sensation, pulling me deeper into the moment. I leaned into him, my breath quickening, the connection overwhelming yet grounding. Sophie moved beside me, her confidence growing, her touch more certain as she joined the rhythm, guided by a quiet nod from Nathan. We moved together, our actions fluid, the moment building, sending warmth through me, tightening every nerve. My balance wavered, but I didn't want to stop. Not when the connection felt this alive, this consuming. Sophie's breath caught, and Nathan guided her closer, his hands steadying her with a gentle touch. She settled near him, her movements slow, adjusting to the moment, her eyes closing as she leaned into the warmth. His hands supported her, one at her back grounding her, as she found her rhythm, her breath uneven but growing steadier. I stepped back, my hand brushing her shoulder, offering quiet encouragement as she surrendered to the moment, her expression softening, her connection to him palpable. Her breath quickened, her hands gripping the cushions, the intensity building until she tensed, a quiet sound escaping as she let go, the moment washing over her. Nathan held her gently, his touch steady, then eased her onto the cushions, his movements careful, assured. He turned to me, his gaze steady, inviting. I was ready, my breath shallow, my body humming with anticipation. He stepped closer, his hands finding my waist, guiding us into a rhythm that felt instinctive, inevitable. Sophie watched, her chest still heaving, a faint smile on her lips. I smiled back, a quiet acknowledgement. Then the connection deepened, pulling me under. I gripped the couch for balance, every moment drawing me closer to the edge, the warmth overwhelming, all-consuming. Nathan's touch was steady, deliberate, guiding me through the intensity, each breath building on the last until I couldn't hold back. A wave crashed over me, raw and unguarded, my breath catching as I surrendered completely, the moment shaking through me. He stayed with me, his presence grounding, carrying me through the afterglow. He turned to Sophie, gently guiding her back to the cushions, his movements fluid, a continuation of the rhythm we'd built. I knelt beside them, brushing hair from her forehead, my touch soft, grounding. Sophie's hand found mine, squeezing tight, anchoring us together. She moved with him, her confidence growing, her breath quickening, the connection deepening with every moment. I watched, my own body still humming, amazed by the intensity, the way we were all woven together. Nathan's focus was unwavering, his presence steady, tireless, like he could carry the moment forever. At last he let out a quiet breath, his body stilling, the air thick with the weight of what we'd shared. Sophie lay there, her chest heaving, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I curled up beside them, my hand resting lightly on her arm, my body warm with the afterglow. I leaned closer, whispering with a grin, "Still think it was a bad idea?" She laughed softly, her voice shaky but warm, shaking her head. That moment lingered, not just what happened, but how it felt. The way we surrendered to the connection, the way it rewrote something inside us. So I'm asking you, if curiosity led you to a door like that, would you step through or walk away? Share your thoughts below. I'm reading every one.
Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more.